fanatic. It's truly an honor and a pleasure. I'd like to thank my higher power for allowing me to be here today. We have a speaker for you this morning who has traveled a long way to be here. He's from Los Angeles, California. Many of you in the front tables know him personally. So right now, I'd like you all to help me welcome Bob L.
I was sitting there and I was thinking, so I have this thing that I kind of joke about. I mean, there's some seriousness to it. I don't get nervous till I'm a foot from the ground. But W.C. Fields said that. And I kept looking at Patty saying, well, we're getting closer to that foot. But the real thing is that I can look out this morning and I can look at all the beautiful people that are in my life and look at all the other people that I've met this weekend. And I know that I'm home. This is where I belong. This is where I'm in my habitat. And I would like to, before I forget, thank the committee for the Western Mass Area Convention for asking me to come here and share about the thing that I love most. And that's recovery in the Fellowship of Narcotics Anonymous. You know, Antoinette got everybody's motor running on Friday night. You know, and Charlie last night touched all of us, you know, with his message, which was like half and half. And my message is a little more subdued. I'm more chronological and I'm more, you know, even tone with my voice. But that doesn't mean the excitement's not within. Because this fellowship excites me. Addicts excite me. Yeah, I don't get that anyplace else. So I get it right here. You know, I'm from Los Angeles, California today. I've been there almost 6 years, but I got clean right down the street in the state of Connecticut. So it's good to be home. You know, I got clean almost 10 years ago. And those of you who may have tried to do this at that time or have done that around that time, I mean, I get those little inklings occasionally as I see faces, you know, and you know Bubba, and I see Bubba. And I remember how it was, you know, at the time when Narcotics Anonymous was very, very young. We didn't know what the hell we were doing, you know. We start meetings and, you know, I mean, how do you do this thing? But there was a common thread and the common bond then as there is today is that when one addict helps another, we all benefit. We all go forward. Because what we can do together, we cannot do alone. You know, my sponsor taught me early in our relationship about the gift and the miracle. And I know that the Fellowship of Narcotics Anonymous is a gift from my higher power. And the miracle is the recovery here. That an addict can stay clean a day at a time and give that message to another addict so no one has to die anymore. Because when I was using, you know, they all told me that you're hopeless, that you ain't going to make it. There's no place for people like you. And the lie is dead. We do recover. I have the benefit, and I've heard this weekend, I have the benefit and the luxury, I guess, of having the best sponsor in Narcotics Anonymous. And I mean that from my heart. And I talked to him about a half an hour ago, maybe 45 minutes. He said, well, I got a dash. I have to go to work. And you tell everybody that I send my love. And I do that for those of you who know my sponsor. And I always ask him, I said, what is there, for the message today? And he tells me the same thing every time. Don't pee in your pants. I say that to lighten things up a little bit for me because anybody who's had the privilege of speaking knows that at the beginning, there's a little bit of sense of uneasiness right after, and you get a little shaky, And my man said it last night. That's just God shaking you, get you honest, get you ready to go. And I like to tell you about how I got here. I like to tell you about what I've done to stay here. My father was a police officer. He put me in jail when I was 10 years old and told me, if you don't change, this is what's going to happen to you. What it did for me, it made me not afraid on the outside to go to jail. So I did all the things that I heard when I first heard the readings in Who is an Addict and What is Narcotics Anonymous, jails, institutions, and I made a lot of stops along the way. They used to have a jail here in Springfield called York Street, I think. They had a bed for me, They did not turn me away at the door. I know I'm giving away my age a little bit, but some of you from Hartford may remember Sim Street. They had a bed for me. None of those places, ever turned me away. I guess it was some kind of relief. But I remember at an early age that I never felt okay. I never felt like the rest of the, kids in the neighborhood. I felt different. And I started to live, for excitement. When all the other kids would pick up soda bottles to turn them into the store to buy candy, I would go back to the store and get a whole box of bottles and bring them to the front of the store. And if there was no bottles to bring, I just went in and stole the candy. It didn't make much difference to me. And that's how I set up and I started to, do the things that my life would be based on. That was my foundation. And I continue to do those kind of things. And when I found that if I put a substance in my body and it made me feel good, then I wanted more. Because I have this disease of never enough, always wanting more. And I found my place looking and searching for more through my entire addiction. In 1971, I found that miracle drug called methadone. I became a methadonian. I went to a VA hospital in Connecticut, and they didn't know much about that drug. So they dosed you pretty good, started you high, left you there for a while, and then threw you out the door at about 30 milligrams. So you still had a kick. But during those times that I would go on that miracle drug, whenever I tried to kick, I'd kick with other drugs. I didn't know about abstinence. I started to make my visits to all the different types of treatments they had then. Daytop, Dartec, NARC, some of those early programs that they tried to have addicts, in line, put us in line somehow. For me, nothing worked. I tried churches. I tried, that religion thing. Everything I tried didn't work. So my foundation was based upon I was hopeless and helpless. That this was my life. I accepted it, and I didn't look back. When I got out of the penitentiary in the late 70s, I thought that if I got married, that would handle my case. Sounds like some of you have tried that. I thought that would handle my case. See, because I'm the kind of addict, I want someone to do it for me. I want someone to take care of me, And I tried that thing, and I was able to keep a needle out of my arm for a couple years. I got a little education, and I went to my first suit and tie job. And I looked at the guy next to me, and he was drooling on himself. And I said, I got to get me some of that. That looks good. I can handle it. I got a job. I mean, a real job. And I started a run in 1979 that almost killed me. Looking back, I can understand the progressive nature of this disease and the near fatal nature of this disease. In 1983, somehow I was sitting in front of this person who told me that I was an addict. I didn't understand what the hell he was talking about. I was doing 120 milligrams of methadone a day. If I got a little squirrely, my doctor put me on 500 milligrams of Thorazine to slow me down. I did the shuffle for a long time, and I thought I was happening. I thought I was doing okay. And a week later, I called this person back and I said, what can you do for me? He said, you need to go to treatment, 28-day program. So seeing that I'm speaking close to where that treatment place is, and you all know about the gazebo and the indoor pool and the brochures they have, I thought I was going on vacation. I brought my bathing suit with me. 28-day program turned into 39 days. I didn't know they took 11 days just to get me to be able to sit up straight, get some of them drugs out of me long enough. I got to tell you, I did not stay clean when I left that institution. But what happened for me is on a Saturday afternoon, a guy named John, a woman named Camille, they came there and they said, we're from Narcotics Anonymous, and an addict can stay clean by coming to our fellowship. And I got goosebumps then like I do now. Camille passed away a few years ago. And last Christmas, when I came to the East Coast to celebrate the holidays with my family, my sponsees, the people I love, I went to Johnny's funeral. He died with this disease, not from it. He had 12 years clean in the fellowship of Narcotics Anonymous. And I was able to go there and grieve with the people that loved him, the people he sponsored. And I was so grateful this man gave me that initial message because he was part of hospitals and institutions. And I'll never forget. See, I thought when he came into that institution and he spoke that he had read my jacket because he talked about me. I said, how dare they let this person read about me so he can tell everybody else? What had happened was I started to identify with another addict, which I had never been able to do my whole life. I left that institution, and for the next 9 months, I was in a detox 5 times. Time was running out. I couldn't stop using. I had crossed that line so many years before that it was so obvious then that I was, getting ready to die from this disease. It was killing me. The last time I went into a detox, into an emergency room, was October 14th, 1984. It's the last day I used. They put me on a stretcher with a bright light, and they said, don't let Bob close his eyes. He's not going to make it. And I really didn't think I was going to make it. See, I wanted to die, but I wanted to live. I really didn't know the difference. I wanted things to get different. And I woke up the next morning on one of those rubber mattresses, if you're familiar with that. Paper slippers under the bed, plastic spoon. I went into the bathroom of that hospital room, and I looked in this mirror, and I didn't know who the hell I was talking to. When the outside and the inside are like two different people. And I kind of said, what are you all about? And I started to cry. And it's the first time I had cried in many, many years. And I got on my knees and I asked whatever God that I could put together at that time to please help me. That I did not want to die using addict. And I get up off my knees and I stayed there for the 5 days of detox. And the last day there was a meeting with my family and the counselors and doctors and everybody that gets involved with us. And they said, Bob, you're a failure. And we're not going to be able to do anything for you again. That's why I love so much our reading that talks about when at the end of the road, what is there left? I felt I really didn't have anything left, except the nurse pulled my coat and said, there must be something that you can think of that can help you. And I believe a loving God entered my life when I said, probably Narcotics Anonymous. She said, I'll get someone to come and talk to you. This person came there that night, and I fully expected him to bring an application. I fully expected to pay him $20 so I could join NA, so NA could keep me clean. NA could do it for me. And what he brought me was a piece of paper. Now, I know today, the fellowship, we're high tech. We got little booklet schedules. Meeting directories look like, they've been professionally printed. He brought me a piece of paper with someone's handwriting that had a few church names and addresses. That was the first schedule I ever saw. And he said, if you go to these places, you'll meet people like us, and you won't have to use. And I wanted to prove him wrong. I wanted to prove that I was hopeless and helpless. And that first day that I left that detox, and I did not do what I was accustomed to doing, which was going to the connection and getting my reward for being in detox for 5 days. What I did was I drove to one of them addresses. It said 8 o'clock, so I got there 7:45. It was in Plainville, Connecticut. And the lights were dark, and it justified my disease to say they're lying to me. There's nothing happening here. And I went up the street, got a cup of coffee. I drove back by the church, and the lights were on. So I parked around the corner so nobody could see my car. I walked in 5 minutes late so I didn't have to talk to anybody. And I sat down in back of the room, and I listened, and my disease was trying to put everybody down. What do they know? They're too young. He ain't got no tattoos. Yeah. He got a haircut. All those things, and Charlie talked about that a little bit last night. That my disease wants to hear or be notified that I cannot get it here. And what really freaked me out was at the end of the meeting, they said, we're going to close this meeting with a prayer. And I got the hell out of there. Quick. See, I thought I'd be at Bradley Airport, that weekend with a tambourine collecting money for these people. It was not what I had in mind. I don't want to sound like, our parents used to say, well, when I was your age, I used to walk through snow to go to school and all that crap. But early in recovery, we had to drive to meetings. And we had to drive across the state. Judy's smiling. There wasn't a meeting on every corner, All the meetings you could print your account on one or two hands at most, for one hand. Tuesday night was West Hartford. Monday night was New London. And we went to these places, and I would sit there seething, trying to make people afraid of me so they wouldn't talk to me. And when they asked me, who are you? I'd say, my name's Chuck. I'm just visiting. Never parked where they could see my car. I had a lot of trust in nobody. But as every good addict, once that methadone started wearing off, I was at a meeting one night and I thought I liked the topic. And I raised my hand and I said I was an addict and my name was Bob. And I shared. And when I got done, they said, keep coming back. I said, wow, they like what I got to say. They want me to come back and say more. Well, people here know me and they know how much of an egotistical maniac I am. It don't take much. But that was my foundation of recovery, And if you got a year clean back then, you were a guru, We didn't know nothing about sponsorship. I mean, my first sponsor I saw at a meeting, and he didn't come, just here. It was that guy that came to the hospital, and he said, I'll sponsor you. I said, great. I knew I'd never have to see him. And if I did and I was still clean, and he asked me how I was doing fine. Because I identified being clean with not using drugs. I tell people I'm in recovery. I go to meetings every day. I got to tell you, you go to 1,000 meetings and nothing changes. What you have is untreated addiction. And what I have found out, if we don't change, our clean date will. And I think we can all know somebody that's happened to. It still scares me to death. It scares me enough that I stay involved here. I stay connected here. When I had a year clean, they said, this key tag glows in the dark. And when I got that key tag, I went in the bathroom and turned the lights off. I wanted to make sure they weren't lying to me. But they told me at a year clean, now the work begins. I thought they meant service work. So every meeting I went to, I had a position. Everyone. If the area needed a chairperson, Connecticut changed from being an area to a region. And we had a couple little areas. And I had the privilege of being a chairperson for the Hartford area. And we really didn't know what we were doing back then. You think things are messed up now. But we did it. We used to raffle books from God knows where to make money to pay rent. We didn't know. There was nobody experienced with the 12 steps. Nevertheless, the 12 traditions. But every place you looked, it said, in order to be of service, you have to have a working knowledge of the 12 steps and 12 traditions. Everybody was new. We didn't know who knew what. And if you're a dope fiend like me, you could talk some good game and you can do anything you want to do. But we stuck together and we hung tough. Early, people would say, hey, Bob, we're going for coffee. You want to go? And I say, no, I got something to do. And you know what I did? I went back to my little apartment and I cried that I didn't think that I could get it hanging around with people. I didn't think that I was able to stay here because once people get to know you, they wouldn't like you and they would push you away. That reason and that feeling of being different my whole life did not change because I stopped using drugs. And at times it got more intense. For me, I was coming up on 2 years clean and something was the matter. I wanted to die still. I still had those thoughts, well, gee, if I just hook up the hose to the car, who's going to care? I mean, who really is going to care? That self-centered, self-obsessed, self-pity thinking that addicts get into. And this little lady came into my life. And I'm real grateful she's still there today, 8 years later. That's a miracle in my life. And she would say things like, Bob, get honest. I didn't know what the hell she was talking about. I figured I am honest. I'm clean. And I identified honesty with telling somebody I was clean and I was still not using. She came to California, and she went out to California to see her sponsor and do a step called a fifth step, which I know a lot of you are writing on. You at least got it in the drawer, I'm sure, with the heading, And I said, get me something from California. She got me a tape of this person that changed my life. I still feel emotional when I think about it, because when I put this tape in the player, I felt like that guy Johnny in that treatment place, because he started talking about me, and I never met this man. And the tears came out of my eyes, and I wanted what this person had. I had heard that enough in the rooms about sponsorship to find someone who has what you want, and he had what I wanted. And a loving God came to me through this person. About 2 weeks later, he was in my house. I heard he had one eye, so I had to learn which side to stand on if I wanted to be seen. I was intimidated. I was afraid. But I got the courage somehow. I don't know if any of you have ever experienced the feeling of trying to ask someone to sponsor you when you think you have all the answers. And I got that feeling. I wanted to ask him to help me. But I'm a rough, tough biker dope fiend, Can't show that. But one night after everybody left the house, I said, Bobby, I like what you got. I'd like you to sponsor me. And those words were the toughest words that I'd ever spoken that I could ever remember. He said it would be a privilege. Where you at with the steps? I said, well, I've done a couple fourth steps and I have a working knowledge. I'm of service. He said, shut up. I'll tell you what you're going to do. You're going to write what that first step means to you. I don't want no book report. I know what the book says. I don't want you to tell me the things that I want to hear, because you don't know what I want to hear. I want you to write what's inside of you. And I really believe that the journey that we take in recovery begins with the first step. This is a 12-step program. They call it that for a reason. We got them on the walls. We got them on cards. We got them in our text. We read them before every meeting, if you haven't noticed. And there's 12 of them puppies, not 3. We don't work them by talking about them. We work them by putting them on paper. That's my experience. I like to talk about my experience with the 12 steps. See, because I never heard that from anybody until I got my sponsor. I'm not saying it wasn't being said or talked about. I never heard it. But when I put on paper what it meant to be powerless over this disease, I wrote about the denial, the unmanageability, the justification and rationalization. I wrote about this disease of self-deception that's trying to kill me. I love to joke and play, but when it comes to talking about this recovery thing, it's serious. This is serious, because this disease is trying to kill me in all kinds of ways. So I wrote about how that disease tries to come in. So as an addict, my best thinking, which got me here, my best thinking tells me, well, if you control everything and put it where it's supposed to be, all will be well. And what I found out on paper, what was inside of me, that my control and management is what made my life unmanageable. The direct opposite of what I thought would happen once I admitted that I was powerless and did not want to act powerless. I needed to control everybody and everything so that I didn't have to feel that powerlessness. People that I sponsor sometimes start getting real heavy about feelings, feeling my feelings. I tell them feelings aren't facts. Feelings are feelings, not to deny them, but they are not facts. I didn't know what to do to act powerless. I didn't know what to do to get up off of that control and management. And thank God for a sponsor that worked 12 steps. Because the answer for me came in step 2, that I came to believe that a power greater than myself could restore me to sanity. Came to believe. I did not believe immediately. I was raised in an organized religion that told me God is going to get you. And how am I going to come to believe in a power that's going to get me? But I came to believe that the insanity that I experienced was based in fear. The insanity that was talked about was in that first step and all the things that I did not to feel powerless. And if I truly was going to take that first step, then I could work step 2 behind it. Work the steps. I do not believe the 12 steps are there for us to work like steps 101 and that we get to 12 and we're done or we go about living our life. To me, the 12 steps is like breathing, and we get spiritually fit to work a step by the preceding steps on a daily basis. If you're writing that inventory, you better be working them first 3 steps. And if you're writing that 8-step list, you better be working the first 7 steps. Because if you're not spiritually fit. I know today that I have a disease that's invisible. If I could see it like a bus, I could step out of the way, but I can't. And because I have this disease that's invisible, I need to counteract that with invisible things called spiritual principles. And the spiritual principles we try to incorporate, especially in the beginning, because we hear them every reading, is honesty, open-mindedness, and willingness. That's why Karen used to say, get honest, and I didn't know what she was talking about. Because if she said, get honest, and I was not open-minded, I couldn't connect it. What I was willing to have was a better way of life, but I was not willing to do anything to get there. Because of my selfish, self-centered, self-obsessed self. Do it for me. You know, when I was 1 year clean, I wanted 10 years clean. Someone said you'd be 10 years older. Enjoy the trip. Enjoy those 10 years. When I started to make that connection in step 2, I can look, a lot of things is hindsight for addicts. And I look back to where I can maybe get a picture of where step 2 started working for me. And maybe some of you can remember that morning that you got out of bed and get on your knees and you asked God to help you like I did. And as I walked towards the bathroom, the thought occurred to me that I did not think about getting high this morning. Matter of fact, I didn't think about getting loaded yesterday either. And I knew something was working because it wasn't me. Because I was 36 years old when I got clean and I had lived a life of being totally consumed and obsessed with using drugs. Every moment of my life, something was happening. I was coming to believe that a power greater than myself was taking away the insanity, taking away the fears. I used to think the insanity was the kind of things that I did, the outward sign. Like I was the kind of addict back then, I would call a connection to see if he was in shape. And I would rob a couple little mom and pop shops on the way to his house. If I didn't get enough money when I got to his house, I robbed him. It was the same concept of the soda bottles. Easier, softer way. It didn't make a whole lot of difference to me because I was consumed by using drugs and I would do anything to use drugs and find ways and means to get more. In step 3, when I wrote about making a decision to turn my will and life over to this power that I had started to trust, started to feel this power was not going to get me. So I learned about a loving God in Narcotics Anonymous. I have to remind myself, remind my sponsees, this is a spiritual, not a religious program. Not only one type of faith gets us close to that higher power. What gets me close to my higher power is the 12 steps. That's why I'm here. That's why I work this program, to get closer to my higher power by incorporating the 12 steps of recovery. And I get that through my sponsor, NA sponsor. When I made a decision to turn my will and life over, I thought that was all inclusive. That once I made that decision, okay, let's go to the next step. When I wrote about it, I realized that I get on my knees, I make a decision, turn my will and life over, and by the time I'm standing straight up, I'm already thinking about what I can do to help. I have to remind myself of that. I asked Sydney, I said, Sydney, how do I know what God's will is? She said, we don't. We know what God's will is not. Knowing what God's will is not helps us, to get somewhat on a track of what probably. See, if things turn out okay, I feel that's God's will. If they don't, I feel I had something to do with it. But when I made a decision to do God's will, I knew that God's will was for me to continue in this process of recovery. And the sponsor said, well, I'll be back in about 5 or 6 weeks and you'll have your inventory done. No suggestions in my sponsorship. I said, how am I going to do that? He said, well, you make a commitment to write 5 minutes every day and you'll be done. But I had a little bit of a puzzle. See, I said, Bobby, I've been in so many institutions. I've done time. Every place I go has asked me to write about myself And I learned real good how to write about myself. What should I put in this inventory? He said, why don't you try telling the truth? Why don't you try putting on paper those things inside of you that you never told anybody? The denial was so great, I figured up 5 weeks, I'll be done in 5 hours. Until I started to get on my knees and I started to write. See, the way I put myself on a notebook was when I get on my knees at night and thank God for being clean, I would pull my notebook out from the mattress and box spring and I would start to write. And most nights I would put myself in the kitchen at the table because I had a little more to say. Because I found out, 80 or 90 pages later, how many secrets I had, how much truth I never told. His sponsor came to town. I wanted him to do me the first day, get it out of the way. The last day, he said, let's do that inventory. Let's do that 5th step. To me, there is no stronger bond that takes place between two addicts as when a sponsee and a sponsor sit down and do a 5th step together. The incredible bond that takes place, the incredible love unconditionally that's expressed is unbelievable. That's my experience. I know people walk away from doing 5th steps saying, only to find out there's more to be revealed. Constantly, I talked about the process and working all the steps every day. Constantly, I find things that I need to express to my sponsor. I look at a 5th step as a way to clean house and to take all the bad out, or as much bad out as we can, to make room for the good. It's a way of getting us spiritually fit to really take a look at step 6. Because if we're truly entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character, then we need to get spiritually fit and honest at what they are. I had heard people in meetings talking about step 6, where after we do our inventory, we ask God to remove something and sit there and wait. I mean, addicts have not just fallen off a turnip truck, We know that if we sit and wait, we'll be on that corner for a long time. Nothing happens for us without an action. Sometimes they refer to different steps as, well, this is an action step. They're all action steps. You got to do them. You got to work them. When he said, write a list of defects of character, I had 13. I thought I was in Dunkin' Donuts having a baker's dozen. What I found out after he looked over my shoulder and mentioned a few words, that I got up there above 40. As a continuing process of recovery, we come to a realization that this one will pop up that we haven't seen before, but it's there. In order to become entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character, I went through a process of doing what I thought was like a school thing, writing the definition of those words. So I thought I knew everything. I was one of them addicts. I knew everything. I know some of you can't identify with that. But I would call my sponsor and he would tell me things and I would say, I know. Yeah, I know. Till one time he said, why don't you write, how come you know every goddamn thing? See, the guys I sponsor heard me say that before. I found out that was the shortest writing assignment I ever had. It was a way to get that honesty going again. And I wrote the definition of these words and I wrote how this defect affected my life. And then I wrote another paragraph on how my life would be without it. And there is freedom when you start working on defects of character. The best thinking I had was if I addressed these things, they came out of the dark, they would go away. Entirely ready to have God remove all these defects, I thought would go away. That put a little fear into me because I thought, well, if these all go away, there'd be nothing left. I would disappear. But what I found out is in step 6 is where our disease manifests itself. And my disease hates the truth. My disease cannot handle the truth. And when I started to tell the truth about how these defects affected my life, I started to get some freedom. Knowing that all that happens for me with my defects is I get them from here to here so that when I need them, I can bring them back when my disease needs them. I went and shared my 6th step with my sponsor at a convention in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. He said, I want you to go back now and I want you to work a 7th step. I want you to humbly ask God to remove your shortcomings. And I know a lot of people get into debate on what's a defect, what's a shortcoming, what's this, what's that. My experience that when I went back and I started to get on my knees and I would humbly ask God, on the knees humbly, ask God to remove the shortcomings, nothing happened. I didn't feel anything. Up to that point, the steps had given me some gratification, some excitement. Step 7 wasn't doing anything for me. So I'd stay on my knees longer. I called my sponsor and I said, nothing's happening in step 7. He said, what did you write about? I said, nothing. He said, what do you expect? You need to write the opposite of all your defects. If you're going to ask God to remove something, what are you going to replace it with? As an addict in my disease, if I remove a defect, I put another one in there. I know that when I get into being self-righteous, I get a little arrogant, I get fear motivated again. When I get afraid, I get angry. When I get angry, I get stupid. And I wrote about the opposites of those defects, and I started to feel some freedom. I had to continue to work those first 7 steps because when sponsor said, I want you to make an 8-step list, that's where I froze. That's where I got stuck because I figured I didn't owe anybody anything. Look at the way they treated me. I don't owe them anything. I got off first. In one simple sentence, my sponsor said, if your recovery depended on this, would you do it? I said, absolutely. And he said, it does. And I got a brand new notebook. And I started to write the people I had harmed and the exact nature of the wrong. And it helped me to put them in kind of like categories. One of the categories was dead. Because the way I used and the folks I used with, there was a lot of them that were not still here. And it bothered me tremendously. Affected me tremendously. And before I could even get to step 9, I had to ask my sponsor, what am I going to do with all these people that are dead? He said, you help the newcomers so they don't have to die. And I never forgot. And I'll never forget. And that's why I reach out and I see someone hurting and the sweat's coming off them and they don't want to use, but they don't want to stay. And they don't feel like they're ever going to get it. And I reach out and I say, just keep coming. You belong here. Don't leave 5 minutes before the miracle. Because a miracle happens here. The addicts do wake up one day not wanting to use, losing the obsession and desire to use. I got to step 9. It was very difficult for me. I read what I had wrote about my family. Those were the easy ones to write about. I did my 4th and 5th step that I would feel is tremendous freedom. I really didn't feel like a tremendous freedom. I didn't feel like I was being healed. I felt like I was in the process of that. So my thought was 6 and 7 does that. I know that all 12 steps are a healing process. But when I got to step 9, and I realized that the reason that I do step 8 is so that I'm not a victim anymore, I began to feel the healing process of recovery for me. Because when I went to my parents and I said to them, I would like to repay financially the damage, they told me I would not live long enough. And I said to my sponsor, what am I going to do? He said, your parents are blue-collar people. Do something for them to make their life a little more comfortable. And the thing that came to mind first, my parents never had a VCR. If they did, it wouldn't have lasted long anyways. Their TVs never lasted. Yeah. And I bought them a VCR and a tape called Gone with the Wind. And I know you young people don't know what that is. I heard about it. But I bought this tape for them. And when I brought that to their house in the middle of the summer, they started to cry. And I started to cry. Because what I realized was I was not doing this for them. I was doing it for me. So I get the freedom of being the best person I can be the best son I can be. An amazing thing began to happen. Step 9 juices us up. I want to go out and get everybody on the list to get the accolades. I want everybody to tell me what a beautiful person I am. Sponsor told me, put the brakes on. You don't make no amends till you talk to me. I'm real grateful for that message. I'm real grateful for that direction because I found out that my best thinking one more time puts me in jackpots. So I don't have to run out to ex-wives, employers that I stole half their business. I mean, some people know I never had that many jobs before I got clean, but the ones I had, I thought that I owned it because I took everything I could from it. One of the things that bothered me also was I was kind of one of them addicts that would go into a store, and if there was a little canister for kids or something, it always fell off the counter into my pocket. And I started to learn a little bit about anonymity and how I make up for those kind of things. And I put money in those kind of things. And that's what does it for me. 9-step, I think my folks were right. I'm never going to live long enough. But I always remember that if my recovery depends on it, that I am willing. I always try to remember 4 years ago, I came from California to Connecticut to be the best man in a wedding. And I got to my mother's house on a Friday. And I know this is going to sound like Oprah Winfrey. That's the way it felt then. And there's a letter my mother said that just arrived. And I opened the letter and there was a picture of this young lady. And a letter that said, "You don't know me, but you're my father." And I was like moved. I was partially moved because this picture looked like me. I remembered 19 years earlier having 5 cases in superior courts, the kind of cases that addicts had. Robbery, drug charges, paternity suits. And I remember paying that one off because I did not want the responsibility. I was totally irresponsible. I didn't care. I was in that grip that we talk about. My whole thought process then was, how the hell am I going to stay out of going to jail? Not no children. And I called my sponsor up and I said, "God, I got this letter," and I told him about it. And he said, "Why deny yourself of something that is probably going to be one of the most beautiful experiences that you could ever have?" And I called this phone number. I made arrangements to meet this young lady. She worked in a bank. I wish I met her earlier. And we went to lunch, and both of us had tears in our eyes. And I met my daughter for the first time when she was 19 years old. I had the privilege of going to lunch with her Friday just before coming here. My daughter does not use drugs. She's a lunatic. She has this disease and don't know it. I know she hasn't got a chance if she starts using them drugs, but she loves me. And I don't know if anybody has this experience, but when you have someone in your life other than a program person, it's easier for us to love program people, but we identify. But my daughter tells me she loves me and called me dad, and it crumbles me. It gets me right there in the pit of my gut. And all I can do. See, when I met her, I wanted to go buy her a Corvette, buy her some jewelry, send her to college, and do all those things that dad's supposed to do. And I didn't have to do that. Because of Narcotics Anonymous, all I need to do is love her. I don't have to move her to California to show her how much I love her. What I do is I stay clean, and that shows her that I love her. I love you, brother. I'll tell you a little Massachusetts story. When I turned 8 years old, I got a phone call at 4:30 in the morning, and a voice said, "This is the Massachusetts State Police, and we have a warrant for your arrest." And I figured it's one of these knuckleheads sitting at the front table over here. But the more he talked, the more I understood the Massachusetts Turnpike in 1973. 19 years ago, when I got the phone call, I was arrested and never arraigned on 4 felonies. And a good dope fiend I talked my way out on that Sunday morning of walking out of state police barracks. It was not computerized back then. It fell through the cracks. Matter of fact, I worked in Pittsfield when I used to have 1 meeting a week, and I got permission and clearance to go into the 2nd Street jail. I used to come up to different jails and H&I commitments in Massachusetts. I even got arrested one time for speeding, and it never came up until 19 years later, and I was scared. I really didn't want to go to jail for gun charges. I knew who they were talking about when they started talking about narcotics and robberies and stolen cars and guns. Kind of sounds like us, some of us. I got a letter from my sponsor, a couple of my sponsees, my daughter, and even my mother. And I went in front of a judge about a year and a half ago in a little town up in the northeast section of Connecticut, right over the line in Massachusetts. And I went in front of this judge. The prosecutor said, we'll have a conversation in my office. I went in there. I showed him the letters. He said, what do you want to do? I said, I want to walk out of here today. My wife works at Universal Studios. He said, who works at Universal? I said, my wife. He said, can she get me a hat? I mean, there ain't enough hats in the world. But we went in front of the judge, and the prosecutor dismissed all the charges. And that's a tribute to Narcotics Anonymous. It's not a tribute to me. I never walked out of any courtroom without handcuffs on. Never. I mean, I hear people getting nollies. I never got nollies. I was always guilty. The ninth step for me has been one of immense freedom. Not being a victim has allowed me, to share of myself freely. Step 10, continue to take personal inventory. Jokingly, I have to say, I know everybody else takes it, so I might as well take it too. But continuing to take personal inventory always meant to me, at the end of the day, I write down all the things I do wrong. And it's true. In early recovery, if I did 1,000 things, I did 1,000 things wrong. 2 left feet, all thumbs. The only thing I could manage at first was not using drugs. Now, I like the banner, without prejudice. I am so grateful I had no prejudice when I got here. I didn't like anybody. I hated everybody. No prejudice. Today I can say that I love everybody. And I know that's probably a hard pill to swallow for some people. How can you love it? I don't like some people, but I love everybody. I love addicts. Like I said when I started, it's my habitat. So when I do my 10th step today, what I try to do is stay honest, open-minded, and willing. The principles that this fellowship is founded on. So I take my personal inventory, and if I'm wrong, admit it. But I don't go out on some kind of a savior trip and tell everybody I'm wrong. I still check with sponsor. I still say this is what's happening. But what it allows me to do in the 10th step is just to keep that process going, keep that communication flowing with myself, my higher power, and my sponsor. Step 11 was one of those esoterical things that I thought I would never, ever get close to. Because there's so many words in step 11, and it has a connotation initially of being a religious thing, And I know I don't look that old, but you get these old bones down in the lotus position, I may not ever get up again. I thought that I had to do something other than Narcotics Anonymous to do that. Sought through prayer and meditation. See, I write the steps, each word. That's the way I do it. I try to get these guys to do it too. Sought means to look for. Through prayer and meditation, talking and listening. It took me a long time to learn how to listen. I used to think I had to get in some kind of a state of unconsciousness to meditate. I just have to listen. I do a lot of my meditating when I drive to work in the morning. I don't put the radio on. I get on my knees in the morning in my bedroom and I ask God to help me, and thanks for letting me be clean. Take care of me today and take care of the people I love. And then I go to the bathroom and I take a shower and I get dressed. And when I get in my car, I listen to see what he's got to say. I don't close my eyes while I'm driving. I'm not that spiritual. So I have a little bit of a thing when they say, the spiritual speaker. We're all spiritual. No more spiritual than anybody else. Sunday morning speaker, sharing. But step 11 allows me something to work on. When I'm working step 11, I have 10 others to work on also. So I don't have to act the way I used to act. I don't have to be the way I used to be. I seek through prayer and meditation to improve, make better my contact with my higher power. Praying only for knowledge of his will for us. The lotto I throw in on Saturday night, but praying only for knowledge of his will for us and the power to carry that out. And what that tells me is what I lack is courage. What I lack is courage. So I used to really be able to identify that I would rather wrestle with somebody on the ground, than try to have courage, try to stand up for something. I learned, though, that if I believe in this, I don't have to fall for anything else. Okay? Not believe in this. This is mine. My experience is that I'm an emotional coward. That's the deal. I'm an emotional coward. But I've learned how to be better with that. I've learned how to be able to relate to my sponsor, my sponsees, addicts in the rooms. And the way that I'm able to do that is because having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps. Newcomers have a spiritual awakening, keep them away from the coffee. Don't let them drink espresso. Because a spiritual awakening to me is a new direction in life. And I get that new direction in life when I come here. And the people that have touched me this week, the people that I chose to go listen to last night instead of going to the dance. The people that I choose to sit there, and although I may be a little bit uncomfortable with their delivery because I've never heard it before, I don't leave before the miracle. Love you. Because I have this new direction in my life, I can carry this message to other addicts. I used to think that meant only sponsees, that I had a secret. I got to tell you, there's no secret here. You don't pick it up, you don't get loaded. And if you want to get better, you get an NA sponsor and you work the 12 steps. Practicing these principles in all our affairs. I used to have this feeling, because of my grandiosity. That's one of them step 6 things, grandiosity. I've written on grandiosity more than any other defect of character. Because of that, I used to think I had to tell everybody, I'm a clean addict, go to work. I'm in recovery. I used to lose jobs because as soon as you say Narcotics Anonymous, there's one of them earth people. I don't know why. You're not welcome anymore. What I've learned is to practice these principles means to be the best person I can be. And I fall short. What I do not fall short on is my love for Narcotics Anonymous, my love for addicts, my love for sponsorship. That's my favorite. Sponsorship's my favorite thing. H&I is pretty favorite too. Phone lines is up there somewhere. I love Narcotics Anonymous. This is mine. Don't come in here talking trash about nothing else. That offends me. I remember when they used to call us purists. They still do call us purists. It's a funny thing. If someone over here tells me they're clean, hits me right in the heart. Someone here is clean and sober, put $2 in the basket. I don't say that to put other fellowships down, because you got to get what you get where you go to get it. But this is mine. My message is Narcotics Anonymous. I'm so grateful to be here. There's a picnic at Peter's house. You're all invited. Thank you for having me. I love you.